I was standing at the window at 11:47 p.m., shirt sour with formula, while my 3-day-old daughter screamed so hard her lips went dry, and it hit me like a punch to the ribs that I could buy a skyscraper, but I couldn't feed my own child. What would you do if the one person who knew how to save your baby was already gone? And what would you say if a stranger knocked at midnight with exactly what your child needed to live? My name is Harrison Cole, and that night Manhattan did its glittering, heartless thing, headlights, sliding along the FDR red dots drifting across the bridges like fireflies, while inside my penthouse the only sound was a newborn trying to cry, without the strength to back it up, that thin, papery sound you never forget. Rachel, my wife, had died 16 hours after giving birth a blood clot that came out of nowhere, the kind of diagnosis doctors deliver like they're reading off a page while your life quietly falls through the floor. And suddenly I was signing forms, choosing a funeral home, answering people's soft voices with a voice that didn't sound like mine at all. The nursery we built together stood there in soft yellow and white, the bassinet tag still on the rocking chair. We argued about at 2 a.m. because she wanted wheat and not lemon, and it was empty, just sitting there like a dare. You know what I mean. We tried 3 formulas in 3 days. Grace would pull 4 or 5 swallows, make this face like the world tilted, choke, go rigid, scream, and then spit everything back across my shirt so hot it felt like a burn. I changed shirts until the laundry basket looked like a crime scene. I warmed the bottle a degree more, held her at a different angle, burped longer, Googled things you should never Google at 3 a.m. Took notes like, I could project manage a human stomach and still nothing. She'd lost 8 ounces since birth, and she had started at 6 pounds. Do the math, it wasn't good, and the pediatrician's emergency line said, bring her in now. But the last time I walked into that hospital, I walked out with Rachel's wedding band in a paper envelope and a pamphlet about grief, so yeah, I froze. I stood there, like a man made out of glass, while my baby's cries got weaker and weaker. Then someone knocked. Not frantic, not tentative. 2 calm knuckles twice, like a person who had already made up her mind and was just waiting for me to catch up. I laid Grace in the bassinet and checked the camera. A woman in navy scrubs stood in the hall, tall hair drawn back into a perfect bun, eyes steady in a way that made me want to sit down. I opened the door and she said, Mr. Cole, my name is Simone Davis. I'm a lactation nurse at Metropolitan. I was on duty when your wife passed, and I heard about your daughter. I think I nodded because she kept talking, voice gentle, but not soft, the voice you use when a house is on fire and you see the hose. I lost my son 3 weeks ago. He was stillborn, but my body is still producing milk. I came to offer to feed your baby if you'll let me. I know how that sounds at midnight in a city where everything can be bought. But this wasn't a purchase. It was an offer that reached back 1,000 years to when neighbors fed one another's children and nobody wrote a policy memo first. You would do that, I asked, with a voice that came out like I'd run on gravel. For her, Simone said, and she nodded toward the nursery where my daughter made a sound like a match burning out. If it were you, what would you have done? Worry about headlines. Think about liability. Ask a lawyer to clear a bottle before you let a starving baby eat. Or just move. We walked to the nursery. Simone washed her hands in the little bathroom and hummed the way people hum when they've learned to make their own calm. She picked up Grace with hands that knew both the weight of babies and the weight of loss, sat in the rocking chair Rachel never got to use, and said, Hey, sweet girl, we're going to fix that. She adjusted her scrub top, tucked Grace along her forearm, whispered, Babies know, and brought her close. My daughter opened her mouth and latched like she was remembering something older than either of us. The room went quiet, not the scary quiet, the holy quiet, the kind you can hear in your bones, little jaw working, little nose breathing, a heart falling back into rhythm after days of freefall. I slid down the wall, sat on the floor, and cried without even trying to stop it. Simone's eyes filled too, but she didn't break the latch, and for 15 minutes, time didn't exist. When Grace finished, her skin looked less gray, and more like the pink of actual life. Her breathing eased. She sagged into sleep like a person who had finally landed. And Simone glanced at the scale I'd bought, that because buying things makes me feel like I'm solving things. "About 3 ounces," she murmured. "She'll need to eat again in 2 hours." I nodded so hard my neck hurt. Would you stay?" I asked. "Tonight and tomorrow," she said. "After that, we'll make a plan." We made a plan in 5 sentences. The guest room was hers. My assistant Julie would bring whatever she needed. If something went wrong, she'd call me first, and if I didn't answer, she'd call again louder. I changed the sheets on the guest bed like a person who knows exactly one useful thing. I woke up at 7:30 a.m. with my phone face down on the nightstand, and for a few seconds I didn't know what world I was in. Then I remembered, and I sprinted down the hall, expecting disaster, expecting alarms, tears the world on fire again, and instead there was sunlight making a clean stripe across the guest room floor, and Simone in a chair, with Grace awake and calm, eyes bright and impossible. "She ate 3 times, Simone said. "Kept it all down. She's already stronger. If relief were visible, you'd have seen it sit on my shoulders and refuse to move." I had Rachel's funeral at 2, and Simone said, "I'll stay here with Grace. You shouldn't bring a 4-day-old to a funeral." And that sentence might have saved me almost as much as her milk did. I got through the service by breathing in the memory of that tiny, satisfied sound Grace made right after a good feed, and the way she'd push one fist open like a starfish when her body finally believed her needs were being met. People hugged me, handed me tissues, told me to rest, and I nodded like a person in a film who can only do one thing at a time. I came home to the smell of baby shampoo and the sound of Simone's low humming, and I sat on the floor by the bassinet and just watched my daughter sleep. That was the first night I thought maybe, just maybe, we were going to make it. We built a rhythm out of small, plain choices. Feeds every 2 to 3 hours, written on a magnetized log on the fridge with a lemon-shaped magnet Rachel had picked. Because it made her laugh, diapers counted burps, recorded a scale on the dresser sunlight, when we could get it quiet, when we couldn't. Dr. Chin checked Grace at 2 weeks and blinked at the chart. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." The weight line that had dropped like a cliff started climbing again, not perfectly, but steady enough that I took pictures of it like it was art. I sent a few photos to Rachel's parents, Donald and Patricia, because they were grieving too, and pictures are a kind of bandage, and they replied with polite one-liners that sounded like people trying to talk underwater. Then they came. No warning. Doorbell tripped the monitor. Grace's startled feed got bumped. You could feel the whole delicate machine rattle, and my chest got tight. Patricia held Grace, and I watched her body fold around the baby with a kind of ache that made my stomach go cold. Donald stood with his jaw set, like he'd made a decision in the car. "We need to talk," he said, and the temperature in the room dropped. Simone took Grace to the nursery. We sat. Donald didn't waste time. "This arrangement can't be permanent. You travel. You run a company. A baby needs stability. We want to take Grace to Boston, where she can have 2 parents and full-time attention." I tried to keep my voice even. "She has a home. She has me. She's thriving." Patricia's tears ran cleanly down her face. You hired a stranger to breastfeed our granddaughter. What happens when she leaves? Simone saved Grace's life, I said, with every word anchored to the floor. We'll plan the future when she's safe in the present. Right now, she's healthy. Donald leaned in. If necessary, we'll pursue legal custody. Pattern interrupt because this is where the script flips. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. The night after they left, Grace spiked a fever. 101.5 at home, 102 in the car, 102.9 by triage. And those numbers crawl under your skin and stay there. Simone moved like a soldier, light blanket, cool washcloth, counting breaths, whispering steady. We're okay, sweet girl, while I drove like the lines on the road, could feel my fear. The ER moved with that fast, focused energy that tells you they're worried too. Blood draw, urine sample, chest x-ray, a tiny IV taped to a hand, smaller than my thumb, and you think you're tough until you see a needle go into a vein that size. Dr. Phillips looked me in the eye and said, pneumonia and antibiotics and admission, and I stepped into the hallway and pressed my forehead to a cold wall, because suddenly I was in the same building where everything had ended, and I could taste metal. Simone didn't step out. She held Grace's other hand and hummed until her own breathing matched the monitor. Day 2, the fever touched 103, and I started bargaining with God like a kid who broke a window. Day 3, the fever broke not with music and angels, just a flat number on a screen and a quiet exhale in a crib. And Dr. Phillips said, responding with a small smile, and Grace took a weak feed from Simone and then a stronger one, and the nurse loosened the oxygen around her cheeks, and I cried into my hands like the faucet snapped off, and I couldn't find it to turn it back on. And then Donald and Patricia walked into the room without knocking. How did this happen? Donald demanded, accusation wobbling under his grief. Patricia's face gray with a fear I recognized because it lived in my ribs too. Dr. Phillips adjusted the tubing and said, "Calm like a courtroom, babies get sick. There's no negligence here." Simone turned hands, steady voice even. I've cared for her around the clock since day 3. She's gaining beautifully, meeting milestones. She's never been neglected. Patricia looked at Simone like she was seeing her for the first time, not as a role, but as a person, and it shifted something just a degree. The doctor asked everyone but parents to step out. I said I'm her father, and Simone stood right where she was because we both knew what that meant. 3 days after we came home, the Morrisons filed for custody. Their petition said I was unfit, single, overworked, unable to provide stability, and pointed to the hospitalization as proof. My lawyers said, we'll win on facts, and Julie turned my kitchen island into a war room, feeding logs with timestamps, weight charts with percentiles, rising receipts, discharge papers, letters from my board, and HR noting the leave I'd taken, Dr. Chin's affidavit, Phillips's note that pneumonia was caught quickly and treated appropriately, Simone's readiness to testify to what actually happened, more from the TV version, the real one with 11. First latch, 3 ounces, feeds every 2 to 3 hours, diaper counts, SATS discharge instructions followed to the letter. Family court doesn't feel like a TV drama. It smells like floor wax and coffee and the tail end of somebody's hope. Beige walls, buzzing lights, a small wooden gavel that looks ridiculous until you realize how many lives it changes before lunch. Their lawyer went first, single father demanding career, unstable caregiving arrangement. Hospitalization proves risk, pausing on words like he wanted them to stick inside the judge's head. Our turn wasn't fireworks. My attorney said evidence the way you say a friend's name. Dr. Chin's letter weight regained by the end of week 1, percentiles climbing development normal. Dr. Phillips' pneumonia not linked to neglect, prompt presentation, appropriate antibiotics, discharge compliance. Simone took the stand. She didn't perform. She reported. She said 11:47 p.m. and first latch, and 3 ounces, and feeding intervals 2 to 3 hours, and no missed well checks, and no concerns about safety or caregiving, and you could feel the air in the room change, because competence is its own kind of testimony, and it doesn't ask for permission to be believed. The judge turned to the Morrisons' lawyer. Do you have any evidence of neglect or abuse? Silence. He turned to me. Mr. Cole, do you love your daughter more than anything in this world? For once, my voice didn't shake. She's everything. Are you committed to raising her yourself? As long as I'm breathing, I said. The judge nodded, small human. Grief, he said to the Morrisons, is not grounds to remove a child from a fit parent. Mr. Cole has demonstrated excellent care. This petition is dismissed. The gavel tapped once and echoed through every room inside my chest. Here's where I could tell you I walked out and made a statement or slammed a door, but the truth is simpler. Simone handed me grace in the hallway, and my daughter wrapped her fist around my tie and tugged like she wanted to reel me closer to what matters, and we went home. The world didn't end. It got quieter. It got kinder. Now, before you type your comment, let's talk about the part that never fits neatly into a script. We say it takes a village, then we make the village jump through hoops. A lactation nurse shows up at midnight to feed a starving baby, and some folks call it inappropriate. Others call it a miracle. And we pretend those positions can't both come from love. Grandparents drown in grief, and instead of a casserole, they hire a lawyer because grief can turn love into panic if you don't give it a chair to sit in. A single dad with a heavy title has to prove he's allowed to be tender, and the court asks for logs and charts to measure what anyone seated in my nursery could have seen with their own eyes. So tell me honestly, if it were you, would you have opened the door at midnight, or would you have waited for daylight and paperwork? Do you think it's fair to judge wet nursing like it's scandalous when it's also the oldest form of neighbor love there is? Should grandparents have stronger rights, or would that punish single parents who are doing everything right? And if you were the judge, would you have ruled any differently? Yeah, that happened. And I know not everyone will agree with how I handled it, which is exactly why I'm telling you now. Because somewhere out there, a parent is pacing a room at 11 with a baby who can't keep a bottle down, and they need to hear that help can look like a stranger with a steady voice and a full supply of what your child needs. Somewhere out there, a grandparent is staring at a flight confirmation, wondering if showing up is love or overreach. Somewhere out there, a nurse is standing at a door, deciding whether to knock. If this story put a lump in your throat, if you've ever waited for a number on a monitor to drop while your heart climbed through your teeth, if someone ever knocked at the exact right moment with the exact right thing, drop a comment and tell me what happened, the act of kindness you still carry. If you disagree, say that too respectfully, and tell me, why should we normalize wet nursing in emergencies, or are we opening doors we don't want to open? Should courts lean harder toward extended family or trust the parent who shows the receipts? Do you think that's fair? Stick around if you're new, because I tell these stories the way life tells them, messy and tender, and sometimes hard to hear, but honest. And I think someone you love might need this one tonight. Hit subscribe if you want more. Share this with the person who would open the door at midnight, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is on your clock right now, because somewhere out there, another parent is awake with the window light on and a baby finally sleeping, and the village is real if we decide to be it.